Never fails. I sit down to do a big long video. I start off fine, but then I get a phlegm glob right in my throat in the middle of it, and I have to cough my way and hack through the rest of it. I just finished a video on my 100 favorite movies of all time, which was something that Luke, aka Razor Wire Reviews, prompted me to do. And I also wanted to take a little time to talk about Sin City, the new film, which unfortunately has done pretty dismal box office. I'm always disappointed when a project like this doesn't catch on. Much like John Carter a couple years ago was really excited by that movie, thought it was a really great, spectacular, fun adventure, and it just bombed big time, which is very disappointing. Now, I can't say that I like Sin City, the new Sin City, nearly as much as John Carter, which is probably a bad sign for those of you who didn't like John Carter all that much. But I will say that I was really looking forward to this movie, and I got pretty much what I expected, which is a little unfortunate because that means that there weren't any really great surprises in the film. The original Sin City was a movie that I liked enough to put on my top 10 of the year. It's a very stylish, very striking movie to look at. It's got great characters, got great violence and music and, beautiful women, great character actors and what have you. Just the stories themselves are really great. My favorite of the lot was The Big Fat Kill, which Clive Owen played Dwight in. I had read just one of the Sin City books prior to that, which was That Yellow Bastard, which Bruce Willis and Jessica Alba starred in the film. It was given to me by a friend, so I read that book, and then after seeing the movie, I read not only the other two stories that were in that film, The Hard Goodbye with Mickey Rourke, of course The Big Fat Kill, but the other books in the series. And that was back in 2005, so it's been over 9 years since I read all those books, and I knew pretty much what to expect from the film, whichever stories that they picked. Of course, what they did, what Rodriguez and Frank Miller who wrote the books did was to put one of the major stories, one of the short stories, and then invent two brand new stories for the second film. Now, I've read and reviews and seen people review them on YouTube like I'm doing now, and there seem to be two principal complaints about that. One, why would they write new stories when the whole idea behind the Sin City movies was to translate as faithfully as possible the books, not just the stories, but the exact dialogue and exact images from the books, recreate them in live action using computer animated backgrounds and what have you. And the other criticism is, why would you make another Sin City movie? It's just more of the same. So yeah, those two complaints kind of oppose each other. I understand the decision to include original stories that hadn't been previously existed as books in the series, in this film. But those two, it just seems like whichever choice they made, someone was not going to be happy about it, and that's the way it is with a lot of films. But yeah, people who had read the books, especially the people that had read the books after they saw that first movie, would probably end up being a little disappointed, some of them, if all they got were the stories which they already knew what happened in them. The major story in the new film, of course, is A Dame to Kill For, which is one of the major books. Although there's been some slight changes made and some shortening, and they did a very good job of adapting it, shortening it and simplifying it slightly, so it didn't run the full length. In each one of these Sin City books, there's a lot of extra dialogue and mostly a great deal of narration that isn't included in the films. Yeah, I actually reread the book A Dame to Kill For after seeing the movie, and yeah, there's lots of dialogue that's exactly the same as the movie, but there's a lot of extra stuff as well that they just couldn't include for time. Another complaint about the movie is the imbalance, basically, in the screen time. The movie, without credits, runs just over an hour and a half. And over half of that is devoted to this one story, A Dame to Kill For. The other half of the movie, the other 45 minutes or so, is a prologue which comes from the book of short stories. It stars Marv, and it's called Just Another Saturday Night. And then you have the other two stories, one of which stars Jessica Alba and is sort of a direct sequel to That Yellow Bastard. And then you have a new story with a brand new character played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, which is called The Long Bad Night, The Long Hard Night, something like that. again, neither of these two stories aren't based on books, so it's basically, I'm not sure exactly whether Frank Miller actually drew books, wrote and drew the books, and then Rodriguez used those as the basis for the movie, but if they had, it's been quite a while since that first film came out, and so it's not like he had to know in advance that these were going to be turned into movies, so that might have affected the decisions that he made. In some of the behind-the-scenes specials and what have you that are on the discs, or on, as part of the promotion before the first film came out, Rodriguez is very insistent on remaining as close to the book as possible, because what he liked about it is the fact that Frank drew these with no intention of having them made into movies, and he wanted to keep that sort of that pure spirit, and of course that wasn't the case with the new ones. I mean, adapt as many of the older books as you wanted to, but any new story is going to be affected somewhat by the notion that it's eventually going to be put on the screen with actors and everything like that. So that might have affected some of Frank Miller's decisions. I was curious about whether or not the differences visually in the two original stories would be noticeable. And there's a lot of very striking imagery in the stories that came from the books themselves. The original stories, the two original stories, don't have as much of that, it would seem. Not that they're bad, they're just not quite as striking, not quite as dynamic. There's more shooting involving camera movement, I think, because you can have camera movement in a movie, whereas you can't have it in a comic book page. There's a very distinctive crane shot in the Joseph Gordon-Levitt storyline, which you've probably seen from the trailer. It starts on high, him standing next to his car on a cliff, and it booms down, and then you see the cityscape behind him. That's an especially cool shot in 3D. And then you've got the shot of Nancy in her story, where she's sitting on her couch in her ratty little apartment, talking with the ghost of Bruce Willis, and the camera kind of moves from one side to the other, and wherever it moves, he's in the background. He was in the background over there, or now he's in the background over there. He's, of course, not alive anymore. So I mean, they can do that. But in a comic book panel, those would probably just be separate panels. You have a shot of Nancy over here, he's in the background over there, despite the fact that he doesn't seem to have actually moved anywhere. There's a scene like that in Cloud Atlas, where Tom Hanks is being whispered to by the devil character played by Hugo Weaving, and no matter what angle it's at, he's always in the background, even though he hasn't moved anywhere, because he's not physically there. He's just this presence. But in the movie, there's basically a shot that goes from one side of the room to the other, and it tracks from one side. Even though Bruce Willis isn't moving around, he seems to be in every part of the room, talking to her, or at least watching over her. It's a little confused about that. I wasn't really sure until the very end of the movie whether he was in her head or whether he was actual ghost or not. Turns out he's a ghost watching over her, and can apparently haunt people, it seems. I actually liked both of the original stories. The Joseph Gordon-Levitt story, not as much, just because there just wasn't a lot happening in that one. And I think that one of the primary reasons why that story is in the movie is because Powers Boothe is the villain in the Jessica Alba story. As you recall, in The Yellow Bastard, Powers Boothe was the senator who caused all the trouble for Bruce Willis, and why he basically chose to die rather than continue to be a problem for Nancy. The reason why people wanted to go after Nancy is to get back at him. So they thought, well, if I kill myself, then no one will have a reason to torment Nancy anymore, and I want to protect her from that. So that's what happened at the end. Of course, Nancy, the Jessica Alba character, blames Senator Rourke and his son for all the problems that she and Bruce Willis have had to suffer through. And so she decides to go on a rampage, take revenge by killing him. Because all that stuff involving her and Bruce Willis having to deal with Rourke and the Yellow Bastard, his son, in the prior movie, was in the prior movie, we don't get to see a whole lot of evil crap that the Powers Boothe character, Senator Rourke, is doing. So instead we have this other storyline where he's terrorizing Joseph Gordon-Levitt instead. He's this young kid, a very cocky gambler. He's got a winning hand coming out of his ears. Always seems to win every bet that he makes. And this is a problem for Mr. Rourke because he doesn't like to lose. And so he has his goons rough him up after he wins a whole pile of money from him. And later on in the story, he basically kills a guy in cold blood, just shoots him in the head, just for no reason other than the fact that he wants to. And I think that that stuff was in there just to sort of help demonstrate what an evil person he is. Because although Nancy and other people talk about what happened with in regards to that whole Yellow Bastard situation in the first movie, they just talk about it, you don't actually see it. So with the Joseph Gordon-Levitt story, you actually get to see Rourke being as evil as he is. So there's a you know, a reason basically for including that. It's a very, very downbeat story. Both of them actually are pretty downbeat. Nancy in particular is quite a changed person from the first one. She was sort of protected, even though she lived in a scuzzy neighborhood and basically danced at a dive bar, and she was sort of protected by Marv, and she was revered actually by a lot of people who just like wanted her beauty to remain unspoiled. And she basically spoils her own beauty, basically, because she's suffering from the loss of Hartigan, and she had this thirst for revenge that she has, and so she messes herself up really good. She cuts up her face in an effort to help get Marv to help her, which Marv does. They team up together to take on Rourke and all of his goons at the compound, and they go on a rampage where he beats everybody up, and she shoots a bunch of people, and then they confront Rourke. But I just got the impression that after that she would not be wanting to dance at Katie's anymore. She's just not the same person anymore. And she really sort of conveys that attitude. Whereas before she was dancing, she seemed to enjoy it. She seemed to enjoy entertaining everyone at the bar. Now it's more like she just does it because she has to, because she doesn't have anything else to do. And after her storyline is finished, I really got the sense that she just wouldn't ever go back to Katie's, wouldn't be a dancer, she'd do something else. I mean, she's cut up her face and everything like that, so, and she actually got shot a couple times as well. But this story has to take place before this Marv story from the first Sin City movie, The Hard Goodbye, because in that story, Marv got arrested for murder and was put on death row. And so the storyline involving him helping Nancy has to come before that one. And yet in the Marv storyline, The Hard Goodbye, in the first Sin City movie, Nancy's dancing at Katie's like nothing ever happens. And this is a problem with prequels. when you write a story that came before the story that you already written, you can't let the characters grow as much as they could have, because it wouldn't work for the story. It disrupts continuity. As I understand it, Rodriguez and Frank Miller are very, very big on continuity. You know, Frank Miller's talked about how he knows everything about all these characters, including where they went to school as little kids, and this sort of seemed to fly in the face of that. So, although I liked the movie overall and I liked the Nancy story overall, it just didn't really fit in with what's already happened. But then again, Sin City 2 can function more of as its own film rather than one that sort of has to go as a sequel to the previous movie. It can sort of be its own thing, I think. It also functions more as one big long movie instead of separate movies, instead of separate stories where characters just sort of wander in and out of each other. You've got the prologue with Marv, and Marv then shows up not only in the last storyline but also in Dwight's story. So we establish his character first, and then he shows up and helps Dwight out with his thing, and then he helps Nancy out with her thing in their stories. Plus, of course, you have the Joseph Gordon-Levitt story establishing Rourke as the bad guy that he is, and then you deal with that in the last storyline involving Nancy, so it all sort of fits together. I would really like to see a third Sin City movie. I hope that they manage to make one, because there's two major books left and several short stories. You have the longest Sin City book, which is called Hell and Back. It's about a guy named Wallace. And you also have Family Values, which is another Dwight story that's actually my favorite of all the Sin City books. I don't know if they'll be able to do that because, you know, this movie has not made very much money, the new one, which is sad. It's very sad. And of course, there's lots of short stories from the book Blood, Guts, and Broads, something like that. Blood, Booze, and Broads. I think that's what the short story collection is. There's some fun ones in there. And those could be sprinkled in. They could even make, you know, another, you know, 3 or 4 movies out of it. Because Hell and Back is so long, it would probably could be its own movie all on its own. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the film. Yeah, overall liked it. Not a big yay, it's great. I actually have to say that I got more of a kick out of The Expendables 3 than I did about Sin City, but I did get what I was expecting, which was lots of, good action and striking visuals and what have you. And Eva Green, of course. When I heard that Eva Green was cast as the Dame to Kill For, I thought, oh my goodness, could not have asked for a better person to play that part, really. I mean, there's, actresses I would like to see play that part, but yeah, she's very good in the part right there. Liked her a lot. And most everyone else in the movie as well. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, that's all I got to say on the matter, other than the fact that it was a good adaptation. Which I think I already said anyway. So, thank you very much for watching. Please comment on my Facebook page, the link is below. I'd appreciate that very much. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye.